My name is Sofia Chen. I'm 28 years old, and I'm standing in the lobby of a boutique hotel in Portland, Oregon, watching the rain streak down the floor-to-ceiling windows. In my hand is a guest list with 150 names on it. Names of people who were supposed to celebrate with me tonight. But there's no reception happening. No first dance, no cake cutting, no champagne toasts. Just me, my husband Marcus, and the quiet hum of a lobby that wasn't meant for us. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My mother called it a circus. Those were her exact words 3 days before what should have been the happiest day of my life. She said she wouldn't fund a circus, and then she pulled every dollar she'd promised. The venue deposit, the catering, the flowers, everything. Gone. Marcus keeps telling me we did the right thing by going through with the ceremony anyway. We got married this morning at City Hall with 2 witnesses we pulled off the street. It was quick, unglamorous, and somehow more honest than anything my mother ever planned. But standing here now, watching couples walk past an evening we're heading to events that actually happened, I can't help but feel the weight of what was taken from me. Not the party. The choice. My mother's name is Patricia Chen. She's 56, works as a senior VP at a pharmaceutical company, and has spent my entire life making sure everyone knows she's in control. Of the narrative, of the budget, of me. Growing up, I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. Good grades meant affection. Perfect behavior meant approval. Deviation meant disappointment so thick you could choke on it. I'm a graphic designer. I work for a mid-sized marketing agency downtown, creating brand identities for startups that actually want to disrupt things. My work is colorful, bold, untraditional. My mother hates it. She wanted me to go to law school. She wanted me in a gray suit making 6 figures by 25. Instead, I chose art, creativity, and a salary that made her wince every time it came up at family dinners. Marcus is different from what she wanted, too. He's 30, a middle school teacher who coaches soccer on weekends and believes in showing up for people. He's black, which my mother never said was a problem out loud, but her silence every time I mentioned him spoke volumes. She'd smile tightly and change the subject. She'd ask if I was sure. She'd suggest I wasn't thinking long-term. When Marcus proposed to me last spring on a hiking trail overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, I cried for 20 minutes straight. Not because I was surprised. We'd talked about marriage for months. But because I knew what came next. I'd have to tell my mother. And I knew she'd find a way to make it about her. The engagement dinner was the first warning sign. My mother insisted on hosting at her country club, a place with white tablecloths and waiters who called you ma'am like it was a title you'd earned. Marcus wore a navy suit. I wore a dress she'd picked out, something pale and safe that made me look like I was attending a business luncheon, not celebrating my future. My mother stood at the head of the table, champagne glass raised, and said, to Sofia, who's finally making a commitment. Not to us. Not to our love. To me, for conforming. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. I squeezed back and stayed quiet, which is what I'd been doing my whole life. The wedding planning started 2 weeks after that dinner, and my mother took over immediately. She booked the venue without asking me, a historic mansion on the west side with marble columns and a ballroom that felt more like a museum than a celebration space. The color scheme was blush and gold because she said it photographed well. The florist was someone she knew from the club. The caterer had catered her company galas for years. Every decision was hers, and every time I tried to suggest something different, she'd smile that tight smile and say, "Sweetheart, I'm paying for this. Trust me, I know what works." Marcus and I wanted something smaller, more intimate. A garden ceremony with string lights and food trucks, maybe a live band playing the kind of music we actually listened to. We wanted our friends there, the people who knew us, not my mother's business associates who couldn't pick me out of a lineup. But every time I brought it up, she'd sigh like I was being difficult and remind me how much money she was spending. "This is a gift, Sofia. Don't be ungrateful." so I swallowed it. I nodded through cake tastings for flavors I didn't like. I smiled at dress fittings for a gown that made me look like a stranger. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I watched my mother turn my wedding into a performance where I was just another prop. Marcus kept asking if I was okay, and I kept lying and saying yes. But the truth was, I felt smaller every day. Like I was disappearing into someone else's idea of who I should be. The breaking point came exactly 3 days before the wedding. I was at work, finishing up a logo design for a client, when my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Sofia," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "We need to talk about the reception." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "I've made a decision," she continued, not waiting for me to respond. "I'm not funding this circus anymore." I blinked, staring at my computer screen like the words hadn't registered. "What are you talking about?" "You've been difficult through this entire process," she said, her tone clipped and businesslike, like she was firing an underperforming employee. "You questioned every decision, you made everything harder than it needed to be, and frankly, I'm done. If you can't appreciate what I'm doing for you, then I'm not doing it." "Mom, the wedding is in 3 days," I said, my voice shaking. "The vendors are confirmed. People are flying in. You can't just cancel everything." "I can, and I am," she replied. "I've already called the venue and told them to cancel the deposit. Consider this a lesson in gratitude." Then she hung up. Just like that. No explanation, no room for conversation, just a dial tone and the sound of my world collapsing. I sat there in my office, staring at my phone, feeling like the floor had opened beneath me. My coworker Jenna knocked on my door and asked if I was okay. I couldn't answer. I just handed her my phone and watched her read the call log, her face shifting from confusion to horror. "She didn't," Jenna whispered. "She did," I said, my voice hollow. "She canceled everything." Marcus arrived at my office 20 minutes later. I'd texted him a single line, "Call me. Emergency." When he walked in and saw my face, he didn't ask questions. He just pulled me into his arms and let me fall apart. I cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child, the kind of sobbing that empties you out completely. "What do we do?" I finally asked, pulling back to look at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes furious, but his voice stayed calm. "We get married anyway," he said. "Without her." That night, we sat on the couch in our apartment and made a new plan. No reception, no grand celebration, just the two of us and a courthouse ceremony. We called our closest friends and told them what happened. Most of them were shocked. A few offered to help pay for something smaller, but we declined. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about taking back control. I wrote my mother an email that night. I didn't send it right away. I just needed to get the words out, to see them on the screen. "You spent my whole life telling me I wasn't enough unless I did things your way. You turned my wedding into a performance and then took it away when I didn't play my part perfectly. But here's what you don't understand. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your money. I don't need you. Marcus and I are getting married with or without you, and for the first time in my life, I'm choosing me." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I hit send. The next morning, Marcus and I walked into the Multnomah County Courthouse holding hands. We asked 2 strangers in the hallway if they'd be our witnesses, a retired couple named Dorothy and Frank who said yes without hesitation. The ceremony lasted 7 minutes. There were no flowers, no music, no speeches. Just a judge, a few legal words, and the overwhelming sensation of freedom. When the judge said, "You may kiss," Marcus cupped my face in his hands and whispered, "We did it." And I whispered back, "We really did." The first 48 hours after the courthouse wedding felt surreal, like I was living in a parallel version of my life that I hadn't planned for but somehow fit better. Marcus and I spent our honeymoon in our apartment, ordering takeout and watching movies we'd seen 100 times. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. No performance, no audience, just us. My phone had been silent since I sent that email to my mother, which should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff waiting for the ground to give way. The ground gave way on Monday morning. I woke up to 14 missed calls from my mother and a string of text messages that started apologetic and ended venomous. The first one read, "Sophia, I think we both said things we didn't mean. Let's talk." The second one, sent an hour later, said, "You're being childish. You owe me a conversation." By the 10th message, the mask had fully slipped. "You're ungrateful and selfish. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By humiliating me in front of everyone I know?" I read them all sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold. Marcus stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. "Don't respond," he said quietly. "She wants a reaction." He was right, but staying silent felt impossible when years of conditioning told me I owed her something. By Tuesday, my mother had escalated. She called my workplace. My boss, a woman named Diane who I'd always respected, pulled me into her office looking uncomfortable. "Sophia, I need to tell you something, and I want you to know I don't think it's appropriate," she began carefully. "Your mother called this morning. She said there was a family emergency and that you weren't responding to her. She wanted me to have you call her immediately." My chest tightened. "What did you say?" "I told her I couldn't get involved in personal matters and that if she needed to reach you, she should try your personal number," Diane said, her expression softening. "But between us, that felt like a boundary violation." "Is everything okay?" I exhaled slowly. "My mother and I are having a disagreement. She's trying to force contact." Diane nodded. "If she calls again, I'll let you know, but I won't be passing along messages. Your personal life is yours." That small act of protection from someone who barely knew me felt monumental. For years, my mother had used access as a weapon, calling my friends, my previous employers, anyone who might relay a message when I tried to create distance. But Diane had just shut a door my mother was used to walking through. Wednesday brought a new tactic. My Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, called me during my lunch break. I almost didn't answer, but Linda had always been kinder than my mother, softer around the edges. "Sophia, honey," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "Your mother is beside herself. She's been crying for days. She just wants to make things right. She canceled my wedding reception 3 days before my wedding," I said flatly. "There's nothing to make right." "She made a mistake," Linda pressed. "She knows that now. She's hurt that you got married without telling her. You didn't even invite her to the courthouse." The absurdity of that statement hung in the air. "She canceled my wedding," I repeated, slower this time. What exactly was I supposed to do? Beg her to come watch me get married after she told me I was running a circus? Linda sighed. "You know how she is, Sophia. She has a hard time expressing herself. But she loves you. She's your mother. You only get one. And she only gets one daughter," I shot back. But that didn't stop her from treating me like a project she could abandon when I didn't perform correctly. Linda went quiet. Then she said, "She's talking about coming to Portland. She wants to see you face to face." My blood went cold. "Tell her not to," I said firmly. "Tell her if she shows up at my home or my workplace, I'll call the police." "Sophia, that's extreme," Linda said, shocked. "No," I replied. "What's extreme is spending 28 years being controlled and then being punished for finally making my own choices. I'm done, Linda. Tell her I'm done." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like power. Marcus came home that evening to find me sitting on the couch staring at my phone. "What happened?" he asked, sitting beside me. I told him about Linda's call, about my mother's threat to come to Portland. He didn't look surprised. We should document everything, he said. The texts, the calls, the workplace contact. Just in case. In case of what? I asked. In case she doesn't stop, he said simply. Your mother doesn't sound like someone who accepts no for an answer. He was right. Thursday morning, a package arrived at our apartment. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting on the label. Inside was a photo album from my childhood, pictures of me at birthdays, holidays, school events. My mother had written notes in the margins. Remember how happy you were here? You used to love spending time with me. I gave you everything. It was manipulation dressed up as nostalgia, and it made my skin crawl. Marcus looked at the album and then at me. What do you want to do with it? Throw it away, I said without hesitation. Or better yet, donate it. Let someone else's memories live in that album. We drove it to a Goodwill drop-off that afternoon, and when I walked back to the car, I felt lighter. Friday brought the final attempt. My mother showed up at my workplace. Diane called me into her office again, this time looking genuinely alarmed. Your mother is in the lobby, she said. She's asking to see you. I told her she needs to leave, but she's insisting it's urgent. My heart hammered in my chest. I don't want to see her. I know, Diane said gently. Do you want me to call security? I nodded, unable to speak. 10 minutes later, Diane returned. She's gone. Security escorted her out. She wasn't happy, but she left. I sat down in Diane's office chair, my legs suddenly weak. Thank you, I managed. You don't have to thank me, Diane said. No one should have to deal with that at work. 2 weeks passed, and the silence from my mother was almost louder than the chaos had been. Marcus and I settled into a rhythm that felt ordinary in the best possible way. We cooked dinners together, walked to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, and talked about the future without someone else's expectations hanging over us. At work, I found myself designing with more confidence, pitching ideas I would have second-guessed before. My creative director, a man named Rob who rarely gave compliments, pulled me aside after a client presentation and said, "Whatever's changed with you lately, keep it up. That was some of your best work." I started therapy during the 3rd week. My friend Jenna had been suggesting it for months, and I'd always made excuses. Too expensive, too busy, I could handle things on my own. But after everything with my mother, I realized handling it alone was exactly what had kept me stuck for so long. My therapist's name was Dr. Patel, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a directness I wasn't expecting. In our second session, she asked me, "When did you start believing your mother's love was something you had to earn?" I sat with that question for a long time before answering. I don't think I ever believed anything different. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. That's the work, then. Learning that love isn't a transaction. Marcus had been my anchor through all of it, but I noticed he was carrying weight too. One night, about a month after the wedding, we were lying in bed and he said quietly, "I keep thinking about what your mom said. About the circus." I turned to face him. "What about it?" "She called our life a circus," he said, staring at the ceiling. "Like loving you, building a life with you, was something ridiculous. Something not worth investing in." His voice cracked slightly, and I realized this had been sitting with him longer than I'd known. "She was wrong," I said firmly. "She was cruel and wrong, and her opinion doesn't define us." "I know," he said, finally looking at me. "But sometimes I wonder if she said it because of me. Because I'm not what she wanted for you." I took his face in my hands. "You're exactly what I want. That's the only thing that matters." He smiled, but I could see the hurt hadn't fully left his eyes. We'd both been wounded by my mother's rejection, just in different ways. Around this time, I started reconnecting with parts of myself I'd let go dormant. I joined a weekly life drawing class at a community art studio, something I used to love in college but abandoned when my mother said it wasn't practical. The instructor, an older woman named Ruth, had a studio full of half-finished paintings and plants that sprawled everywhere. Art isn't about being practical, she told the class on the first night. It's about being alive. I went home that night with charcoal under my fingernails and a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Marcus noticed the change too. You seem different, he said one evening while I was sketching at the kitchen table. Good different. I feel different, I admitted. Like I'm remembering who I was before I spent all my energy trying to be who she wanted. He came up behind me, looking at my drawing, a rough sketch of the view from our apartment window. I like who you're becoming, he said softly. I like who I'm becoming too, I replied. My mother tried to reach out one more time during this period, but it was through a different channel. She sent a letter, an actual handwritten letter in the mail, which felt almost archaic. I held it in my hands for a full day before opening it. When I finally did, standing alone in the apartment while Marcus was at work, the words felt predictable. She was sorry. She overreacted. She just wanted what was best for me. She missed me. But nowhere in the letter did she acknowledge what she'd actually done. There was no recognition of the control, the manipulation, the cruelty of pulling funding 3 days before my wedding. It was an apology that apologized for nothing. I read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope. I didn't respond. Dr. Patel had taught me that not every message deserves a reply, that silence can be an answer in itself. 3 months after the courthouse wedding, Marcus and I finally took our honeymoon. Nothing extravagant, just a long weekend at a cabin in the Cascade Mountains with no cell service and nothing but trees and silence. On our last morning there, we sat on the porch watching fog roll through the valley, drinking coffee that tasted better than it probably was. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. Do you regret it? He asked. Any of it? I thought about the question honestly. The canceled reception, the courthouse ceremony, the severance from my mother. No, I said. I regret the years I spent shrinking myself. But this? Walking away? I'd do it again. He smiled, and we sat there in comfortable quiet, the kind of quiet that felt safe instead of suffocating. Back in Portland, life continued to unfold in small, meaningful ways. I got promoted to senior designer at work. Marcus's soccer team won their division championship. We adopted a cat from the shelter, a scraggly orange thing we named Mango who had absolutely no manners and made us laugh every single day. One evening, about 5 months after everything happened, I was getting ready for bed when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I stopped, really looking at myself for the first time in a long time. I looked tired, but not worn down. There were smile lines at the corners of my eyes that hadn't been there before. I looked like someone who'd survived something and come out the other side softer but stronger. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind me. What are you thinking about? He asked. That my mother was right about one thing, I said, still looking at my reflection. This is a circus. Our life is messy and imperfect and nothing like she planned. And I love it exactly the way it is. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and we stood there together in the mirror, two people who'd chosen each other over approval, over money, over expectations. Best circus I've ever seen, he whispered. I leaned back into him and smiled. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing for anyone. I was just living, freely and loudly and exactly as myself. And that felt like the only celebration I'd ever really needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.